This is Joe narrating a PowerPoint on U.S. history, westward expansion, the Civil War, and Reconstruction. Key ideas were that there was a difference of opinion about whether slaves should be held in the United States. The South wanted slavery, the North did not. This conflict developed into the Civil War, fought between 1860 and 1865. The North won the war, slavery was abolished, and rebuilding of the South began. This is a slave auction in a drawing. The slaves are on the platform. Most of these slaves were brought from Africa, either captured outright or taken as prisoners of war, brought across the ocean and sold to landowners in the South. Slavery had been abolished in the northern states in the early 1800s. Slaves were a key part of the southern economy. They were used to perform farm labor in the South, making the slave owners and landowners quite wealthy. This is a picture of a plantation home. The major crop at this time was cotton. In this picture you can see slaves of all ages harvesting the cotton. This is difficult work. The slaves were paid no wages. They were provided food and housing, but their families could be broken up at the will of the slave owner, and there was severe punishment for escaping. For example, here's a slave who had been whipped as punishment for escaping. This map shows the United States as it existed in 1860, with the free states depicted in light green and the slave states depicted in pink. As new territories joined the United States, a compromise was reached where they would be brought in pairs, one a free state that did not allow slavery, and one a slave state that did allow slavery. This had seemed to be working up until 1860. When Abraham Lincoln was elected, he had promised as part of his presidency to eliminate the extension of slavery into the new territories, and as a result of this, the southern states seceded or broke away from the United States and started their own nation. Their nation was called the Confederacy, and a war was fought. Here on the left you see the Confederate flag over the Confederate soldiers in gray uniforms fighting. On the right, the Union forces, the ones loyal to the United States, with the United States flag as it then existed and the blue uniforms of the Union soldiers. The farthest the Confederate soldiers advanced into the North was Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where a 3-day battle was fought from July 1st to 3rd in 1863. The North won that battle, and from that point on, the North began to take control of the war. In 1865, General Lee, on the left here, the commander of the Confederate forces, surrendered to Ulysses Grant, the leader of the Union forces. General Grant later became the 18th President of the United States. There are many monuments to the Civil War soldiers, both in the North and the South. In Philadelphia, we have monuments to the Union generals. Here, General George McClellan at City Hall. Also at City Hall is a statue of General Joshua Reynolds. On the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, as you head towards the Art Museum, there are 2 towers acting like gates on the parkway. These are monuments to the Civil War soldiers and sailors. After the Civil War, the South was extensively damaged, and it was rebuilt during a process called Reconstruction. Reconstruction was performed in physical terms, but also in political terms. For the first time, blacks in the South were given full political and civil equality, and the leaders of the secession movement, meaning those who wanted to leave the United States, were denied political rights. This process lasted for about 15 years, after which blacks were often denied their civil rights for decades. There were millions of slaves in the South who basically were now non-slaves. Many of them became sharecroppers, where they would stay on the land that they had farmed previously, and in compensation for living on the land, they would turn over a portion of their crops to the landowner. In other words, they would give a share of their crops to the landowner. This allowed them a life, but did not allow them to generate enough cash income to have their own land. The Transcontinental Railroad was finished 4 years after the Civil War ended. In 1869, tracks coming from the west and tracks coming from the east met in Promontory, Utah, and this made the link from the mid-United States to the Pacific coast complete. Many of the people who worked on the Transcontinental Railroad were immigrants, especially Chinese immigrants. After this railroad was completed, many of these immigrants settled in cities like New York, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. Here is a historic marker on Race Street between 9th and 10th Street, which shows the founding of Chinatown in Philadelphia. This is a map of territorial acquisitions, meaning land that was added to the growing United States. In 1783, the Revolutionary War ended, the 13 colonies became the United States, and England gave up its rights to land as far west as the Mississippi River. So at that point, the United States tripled in size. In 1803, under Thomas Jefferson, the third president, the Louisiana Purchase was made from France for $15 million, almost doubling the size of the United States. Florida was purchased from Spain in 1821. In 1845, United States citizens had taken over control of part of Mexico, which they called Texas, and they declared independence from Mexico. This Republic of Texas was added or annexed to the United States in 1845. Mexico and the United States fought a war as a result of this, and in 1848 a treaty was signed which turned over the yellow area called Mexican Cession to the United States. So you can see that a huge chunk of the United States was, up until 1845, part of Mexico. Then Oregon Country was turned over to the United States in 1846 in an agreement with Britain. On this map you can see the dates of when states became officially states. In the lower left you can see Alaska. The land itself was purchased from Russia in 1867 for $7.2 million, or 2 cents an acre, and it became a state in 1959. This is not to scale because Alaska is officially twice the size of Texas. It's a huge state. Hawaii was acquired in 1898 by the United States and was made a state officially in 1959, becoming the last state to join the Union. This is all for Lesson 2, Westward Expansion, the Civil War, and Reconstruction.